Hello, everyone. It is another Mondays with Melissa. Last week, I interviewed Hannah McLeod, and she has quite the story. So, if you have not listened to that episode yet, I would recommend you go back and listen. Today, I am going to share my thoughts on grief and loss. And these are just my thoughts, just my perspective. I just want to be very clear with that up front that I am not telling you what you should or shouldn't do when it comes to grief and loss. This is just the thoughts that I have based on my own experience. And so there's my caveat up front. Also, if you can't tell, I have a little bit of a cold. And so I'm going to do my best to get through this, but it's probably going to be a shorter Mondays with Melissa because, it just doesn't feel great to talk right now. So we're going to do the best with what we can, right? Okay, so I just want to touch on a few things when it comes to grief and loss. And the first is that oftentimes when we hear grief and loss, we think of a death. And while that is very true, there's other things that can lead to grief and loss that it's important that we're mindful of because it can hit us when we least expect it if we aren't aware that it is a thing. So, when we're talking about kids moving from one home to another home, whether it's because of divorce or whether it's because of foster care or whether it's because of adoption, that's a loss of a home, a loss of a family. And even if it is under the best circumstances, it still is a loss. And that can be really hard for our kids. We also need to be aware of when we move to a new house or we experience divorce, that can be hard on us too. And again, even if it's a good thing, we're excited to move to a new house. Maybe it's a nicer, bigger, it's our dream house. It still is the loss of the house that we lived in for years, maybe. And if we experience a divorce, most of the time it's for a good reason. And it's something that is a good thing, but at the same time, it's a loss. And it's okay to grieve those losses and not see them as, oh, that's just something that happened. I need to keep moving forward. We do need to keep moving forward, but we need to leave space for our body to feel those feels and to know that even if what we're quote unquote losing was something not healthy for us or something toxic, like an abusive relationship or an unhealthy marriage or, having a child removed from an unhealthy living situation, there's that still our body knows that as normal. That is what our body knows as normal. And so when we move our body into a different direction, even if it's a positive direction, it can be a shock to the system. And so giving ourselves space to have the ability to grieve the losses that we experience. I also want to point out that every journey is different. And so you heard Hannah talk last week about losing her mom to cancer and that she felt like she was able to, because the journey was 8 years before her mom passed from when she got her diagnosis, that, she felt like she was able to kind of grieve each moment as they happened so that when her mom finally did pass, it didn't, in her perspective, it didn't feel as hard. And that is what some people feel. And I can also say from my perspective, because I have also lost a parent, that yes, I agree that it didn't feel as hard in that moment when I lost my dad, but I have found that there are moments that sneak up on me that I maybe wasn't aware of or didn't think about before he passed that could potentially be hard for me. And so everybody's journey is different. And I think that's what I want you to hear from me is whether it's a death or whether it is, a big situation that led to a loss, even with pets, losing a pet can be so hard. And we need to give ourselves space to grieve that loss. And again, it looks different for everybody. So, for some people, it may look like just keep moving forward. And Hannah talked about her grief bursts that her and her family allows themselves to have. That's what they've kind of coined the term. And I love that because it allows you to, when you're having a moment, to experience that moment for what it is and allow yourself to cry and be sad and think about the hard, and then keep moving forward through that tunnel. And so I think what I am hoping that you hear from this is two things. One, give yourself space to have those feelings. And two, be aware of that it's not just death that can make us feel grief and loss. It's bigger than that. Three, our kids can feel grief and loss in ways that maybe we're not aware of. And so being mindful of that, especially if you have kids who have experienced hard things. And then the fourth thing is really just being aware of others around you, that if you have a friend who maybe experiences, like I have had a parent pass away. And so as I have friends who start to experience that and they have parents that pass away, I'm not going to put my experience onto them. I'm not going to say, I personally feel like my dad is in heaven with Jesus, singing, dancing, playing his guitar, and being his whole self finally. He no longer has to fight the demons that he had to fight here on earth. But I'm not going to put that on somebody else and say, if, a friend loses their dad, I'm not going to say to them, oh, he's better in heaven. He's happier in heaven. Unless my friend has said that to me, and I know that is his or her truth, I'm not going to say that because I don't know that that is his or her truth. That may be my truth, but that doesn't mean that is everyone's truth. And so we really need to be cautious of what we're saying. And I think just instead of trying to make someone feel better, just acknowledging that it's hard and that you're there to listen, that you are there to support them, that you are there to help with whatever they need. So maybe let's change the script to when we are, trying to support a friend who's going through a loss, instead of saying, there's a bigger picture, or everything happens for a reason, or your loved one is better off, your loved one is happier and whole again. Maybe changing the script to, this is really hard, and I'm sorry you're going through this. Please let me know if there's anything I can do to help. That's it. Acknowledge that the feeling is hard, the feeling is big. Acknowledge that it's a hard time and be present. Be there to support them. Do that with your kids too. If you know your kids have experienced grief and loss, same thing. This is really hard. I know you miss your mom, or I know that you miss our old house, or I know that you miss your friends from that school that we used to go to. And I'm here. I'm here to hold you and help you with whatever you might need. Those are my thoughts for today. I know it's short, but I think that it was important to share. I just want to make sure that people hear that grief and loss is bigger than what we sometimes think about. So that's what I have for you today. Next week, I have my friend. Let's see. Next week, I have Melissa Corkum on the episode, or on the podcast, and she is going to talk to us about blocked care and the polyvagal theory and the safe and sound protocol and her new book that just came out, Reclaim Compassion. So come back next week to hear more from Melissa about parenting and how hard it can be and ways that we can take care of ourselves to do better for our kids. All right, everyone. As always, if you have any questions about anything I talked about today, feel free to shoot me a DM on Instagram or an email, melissa@mendingfamilieswa.com. All right, have a great day, and I will see you next week.